10 to 11 ಇತ್ತಲ್ಲ
ಎಸ್ ಮ್ಯಾಮ್
ಹೇಳ್ಬಿಡ್ರಿ ಅವ್ರು ಬರ್ತಾರೆ ಮೇಡಮ್
ಹಾಂ ಸ್ಟಾರ್ಟ್ ಆಯ್ತಾ
ಏನು ತಗೊಂಡಾರ ಟಾಪಿಕ್ ಗೊತ್ತಿಲ್ಲ ನನಗೆ
ಹಾಂ ನಾ ಬರ್ಕೊಂಡಿರ್ತೀವಿ
ಟಾಪಿಕ್ ಬರ್ಬೋದು
ಹಾಂ ಥ್ಯಾಂಕ್ ಯು ಸ್ಟಾರ್ಟ್ ಆಗಿದೆ
Good morning, students. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning, ma'am.
Yeah. So, what we have discussed in the last class? Yes. What you have discussed in the last class? Yes.
Gastric motility.
Yes, yes. What you have discussed? You people will not write down.
Movements
You
of
must
stomach.
write down the notes. Yeah, movements of stomach and small intestine, isn't it? In continuation of movement of GI tract, we discussed movement of stomach and small intestine, isn't it? So, what are the movements, important movements of small intestine? What are the different types of movements, first of all? What are the different types of movements? Yes?
Propulsion, segmentation.
What are the different types of movements? Yes?
Propulsion.
At least you tell one of the important movement which occurs in small intestine.
Peristalsis.
Yes? Yeah. Peristaltic movement. That is the segmentation movement. Okay. So the movements are broadly classified as mixing movement and the propulsive movement, isn't it? I told you this in the last class. Mixing movement example is segmentation movement. Okay. Whereas the propulsive movement which propel the food particles forwards, that is the propulsive movement, and best example is peristaltic movement. Okay, this I told you in the last class itself. Now this I told you what is digestive system involved, okay, and what is digestion, what are the different phases I told you in the last class. Okay, what are the structure of digestive system, this also you know very well now. Regulation is by extrinsic and intrinsic. Extrinsic is by autonomic nervous system and intrinsic is by myenteric and Meissner's plexus. Okay, so this is the basics. And motility, as I told you, our GI tract has smooth muscle throughout, but some part it has even the skeletal muscle, that is tongue and pharynx, upper 2/3 of the esophagus, and in anal region we have some striated or skeletal muscles. Okay, so movements of small intestine, as I told you, there are two important types, that is mixing, example is segmentation contractions, and propulsive contractions. In that, very good example is peristaltic movements. Okay, however, both the contraction occurs simultaneously in small intestine. Okay, now to revise this, I told you in the last class itself. Okay, that is segmentation movement. These are the mixing movements, but they also help to some extent in propulsion, but their main function is mixing. Okay, and propulsive or peristaltic movements. Okay, and here the velocity of movement is 0.5 to 2 centimeters per second. It moves, the peristaltic wave moves at a rate of 2 centimeters per second. Faster in the proximal intestine and slower in the terminal intestine. As I told you, they are the faster. Okay, that is around 12 to 15 times in the duodenum, whereas as you come to the end, ileum, its rate goes on decreasing, isn't it? This I told you in the last class itself. So faster in the proximal intestine and slower in the terminal intestine, and very weak and usually die out after traveling only 3 to 5 centimeters. Net movement is 1 centimeter per minute. 3 to 5 hours are required for passage of chyme from the pylorus to the ileocecal valve. Okay, so the net movement is 1 centimeter per minute. Okay, and it takes 3 to 5 hours are required for passage of chyme from the pylorus to the ileocecal valve. Okay, so this is the diagram showing the segmentation movement. In the first, it is regularly placed. So first it is regularly placed, here isolated, here irregularly spaced, and here it is weak, regularly spaced. Okay, there are different types of segmentation movements. Okay, now peristaltic contraction. Peristaltic activity of the small intestine is greatly increased after a meal by the entry of chyme into the duodenum, causing stretch of the duodenal wall. So stretch constitute a very important stimulus in GI tract from stomach to the large intestine. Okay, so the distension or stress of the GI tract because of the content is a very important stimulus, and that causes the contraction, initiation of peristaltic movement. Okay, then I told you these reflexes also last time: gastroenteric reflex, there is also a gastrocolic reflex, and there is also a intestinal reflexes. So many reflexes are active in our GI tract. So gastroenteric reflex, that is initiated by distension of the stomach and conducted principally through the myenteric plexus from the stomach down along the wall of the small intestine. Gastroenteric reflex is nothing but whenever the stomach is distended, okay, it leads to motility in the duodenum and small intestine. Okay, duodenum, jejunum and ileum. So whenever stomach is distended, it causes increase in peristaltic movement or increased motility of the small intestine. That is called as gastroenteric reflex. Okay, then some of the chemicals like gastrin is a hormone, and CCK, cholecystokinin, and insulin, motilin and serotonin, these substances enhances intestinal motility. Gastrin is a hormone secreted by G cells of stomach. CCK is secreted by intestine. Insulin from pancreas, isn't it? Motilin again from the intestine. Okay, and serotonin is again from the intestinal cells. So it enhances intestinal motility, whereas secretin and glucagon inhibits small intestinal motility. Okay, secretin and glucagon inhibit small intestinal motility. Okay, then the function of peristaltic wave in the small intestine is not only to cause progression of chyme towards the ileocecal wall, but also to spread out the chyme along the intestinal mucosa. So peristaltic wave is not only have a propulsive function, but it also spread out the chyme that along the intestinal mucosa, so that it helps in absorption. Okay, as much as the food or chyme is exposed to the mucosa, absorption rate will increase. So these peristaltic waves are not only the propulsive wave, but they also help in absorption as the food particles are coming in contact to the intestinal mucosa. Okay, on reaching the ileocecal valve, the chyme is sometimes blocked for several hours until the person eats another meal. So after pyloric sphincter, this is a one more blockage, that is ileocecal valve. Okay, I will be telling this in the further slides. Okay, so on reaching the ileocecal valve, the chyme is sometimes stop here, because that ileocecal valve will be usually closed unless a strong peristaltic wave will come from behind, then only it opens. Okay, so blocked for several hours until the person eats another meal. Okay, so here the chyme may stay for several hours. Then gastroileal reflex intensifies peristalsis in the ileum. So whenever the food is there in the stomach and stomach is distended, it leads to increase in peristalsis in ileum. That is called as gastroileal reflex. Intensifies peristalsis in the ileum and forces the remaining chyme through the ileocecal valve into the cecum of the large intestine. So whenever stomach is distended, peristaltic waves will start and this forces the chyme to pass to the cecum. Opening of ileocecal valve and entry of chyme into the cecum of the large intestine. Okay. Now, what is this ileocecal valve? This is prevents backflow of fecal content from the colon into the small intestine. So that is the important function of ileocecal valve. It prevents the backflow of fecal matter and the ileocecal valve protrudes into the lumen of the cecum and therefore is forcibly closed when excess pressure built up in the cecum. So this valve protrudes into the lumen of the cecum and therefore is forcefully closed when excess pressure built in the cecum. So when there is a pressure is more in the cecum, then this is protrudes into the lumen of the cecum and it is forcefully closed so that the cecal matter should not enter into the small intestine. Okay, so then the thickened circular muscle, the ileocecal sphincter remains mildly constricted and slows emptying of ileal content into the cecum immediately after a meal. Okay, so the ileocecal sphincter remains mildly constricted and slows emptying of the ileal content into the cecum immediately after a meal. So immediately after a meal it should not go, it should remain for some time for proper digestion and absorption. Okay, then resistance to emptying at the ileocecal valve prolongs the stay of chyme in the ileum and thereby facilitate absorption. So this delay is to facilitate absorption. Normally only 1500 to 2000 ml of chyme empties into the cecum each day. Okay, so normally only 1500 to 2000 ml of chyme empties into the cecum each day. When the cecum is distended, that is the contraction of ileocecal sphincter becomes intensified and ileal peristalsis is inhibited. This is because the cecal content should not enter into the ileum. So whenever cecum is distended, contraction of the ileocecal sphincter becomes more stronger. Okay, when a person has an inflamed appendix, the irritation of this vestigial remnant of the cecum can cause such intense spasm of ileocecal sphincter and partial paralysis of ileum. Okay, so in inflammation also that ileocecal valve will be closed, intensely closed. Okay, so this is the diagram showing the ileal sphincter. This is the ileal sphincter. Okay, that is the muscle layer and this is the ileocecal valve. Okay, ileocecal valve. This is colon and this is the ileum. So whenever in the cecum pressure is increased, okay, inhibits peristalsis of ileum. So whenever the pressure is more in the cecum, this causes strong closure of this valve and inhibition of peristalsis in ileum, so that the content of ileum should not, so that the content of cecum should not enter back. Okay, that's the purpose. And whenever pressure and chemical irritation, pressure is more in the ileum and if there is any chemical irritation of ileum, okay, so this causes relax in sphincter. Sphincter will relax and content of ileum enter into the cecum. Okay, you understood. So whenever the pressure is more in the ileum, this sphincter will relax. Okay, and fluidity of content promotes emptying. If the content are in a fluid state, then it increases or promotes the emptying of cecum. Okay, so this is the ileocecal valve. Okay, now coming on to the movements of large intestine. So in small intestine, last time I told you detail about peristaltic waves and all those things. Okay, so peristaltic waves are nothing but the wave of contraction preceded by a wave of relaxation, and it leads to propulsion of food. That I told you in the last class itself. Okay, now coming on to the movement of large intestine. So absorption of water and electrolyte from the chyme to form solid feces. So the function of large intestine is absorption of water and electrolyte from the chyme to form the solid feces. Here almost all the nutrients will be absorbed in the small intestine only. So in large intestine, maximum amount of water and electrolytes will be absorbed and storage of fecal matter until it can be expelled. These are the function of our large intestine, that is storage of fecal matter until it can be expelled and absorption of water and electrolyte. Okay, then the proximal half of the colon is concerned principally with absorption and the distal half with the storage. Okay, so beginning of the colon is concerned with absorption of water and electrolyte, and the distal half is for the storage function. Because intense colon wall movements are not required for this function, the movement of the colon are normally very sluggish. Okay, so for this movement, that is for the absorption of water and electrolyte and for the storage function, intense movements are not required. Hence in colon, the movements are not so strong, they are sluggish, like as that in case of a small intestine there are peristaltic waves are very strong. Okay, so that type of strong movements are not required here. So the movements are normally sluggish, only just before defecation the movement will be strong. Okay, now coming on to the, it takes about 18 to 24 hours for material to pass through the large intestine. So almost one day, 18 to 24 hours for material to pass through the large intestine. The large intestine undergoes mass movements, that is strong peristaltic contraction, about 3 or 4 times per day. Okay, so the function of these mass peristaltic movement is, so it leads to propulsion of all the content of the colon into the rectum. Okay, so each mass movement extends over 20 centimeter of the colon, that is the long portion of the colon take parts in each movement. So each mass movement extends over 20 centimeter of the colon and moves the colon content a considerable distance towards the anus. Mass movements are stimulated by irritation or distension of the colon, local reflexes in the enteric plexus, and intense parasympathetic stimulation. Mass movement is responsible for the sudden distension of the rectum that triggers defecation. So most of the time the movements are sluggish, but the mass peristaltic movements occur 3 to 4 times per day in a colon. Okay, and this triggers defecation. Okay, defecation reflex. Then the circular muscles contract simultaneously with the tinea coli. So in large intestine, the longitudinal muscle, so our GI tract, muscular layer of our GI tract has circular muscle as well as a longitudinal layer, isn't it? In large intestine, the longitudinal muscles form 3 bands. Those are called as tinea coli. 3 bands of smooth muscle form the longitudinal muscles of colon. So longitudinal muscles of the colon forms 3 bands. Those are called as tinea coli. Okay, of the colon wall to cause constriction and shortening of the colon. So when these bands constrict, So larger part of the colon will constrict and it leads to a formation of a segment, but here it is called as haustra. In large intestine it is called as haustra, and hence these contractions is called as haustral contractions. Okay, so as there is a segmental contraction in a small intestine, the haustral contraction, the segments are formed, those are called as haustra in case of large intestine. It is because of the longitudinal muscles form a 3 bands. Okay, so when these bands constrict, larger group of larger segment of the large intestine will form a segment that is called as haustra. So haustra are pouches formed in the colon wall along its length, giving the colon a puckered appearance. Local reflexes regulate haustra formation. The thought or smell of food, distension of the stomach, and the movement of chyme into the duodenum can stimulate the gastrocolic and duodenocolic reflexes. Gastrocolic reflexes, whenever there is a distension of stomach, it leads to increased motility of the colon, and whenever there is a distension of duodenum, that leads to increased motility of colon. These are called as gastrocolic and duodenocolic reflexes. Okay. So this is the structure of your large intestine. So this is an ileocecal valve. Okay. Then this is the ascending colon. Okay. Here the chyme will be most of the time fluid. So maximum amount of water will be reabsorbed. This becomes semi-fluid here when it comes to the right flexure. Okay, then this is the transverse colon. Okay, then this is the descending colon, sigmoid colon. Okay, and the finally the waste material, that is feces, will be solid. Okay, excess motility causes less absorption and diarrhea or loose feces. So when these movements become very fast, motility increases because of any irritation or anything, the absorption will not occur, electrolyte and water absorption will not occur, then the person has a loose motion or diarrhea. Okay, so poor motility causes greater absorption, and hard feces in transverse colon causes constipation. So if motility is very much poor also, that may lead to constipation. If there is a excess motility, that may lead to diarrhea, less time for absorption of water and electrolytes. Okay, now coming on to the defecation reflex. Okay, so the defecation reflex removes undigested feces from the body. Okay, it is a spinal reflex triggered by distension of the rectum. Okay, and the smooth muscle of the internal anal sphincter relaxes. Okay, just a minute, when it's time over, you just remind me. Okay, students, are you alert?
Yes, ma'am.
Are you
Yes,
alert?
ma'am.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
ma'am.
Whenever it is
Yes,
12
ma'am.
o'clock, you just remind. Just remind me, okay?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. So here, it is a spinal reflex triggered by distension of rectum. The smooth muscle of internal anal sphincter relaxes. Peristaltic contraction in the rectum push material towards the anus. Okay. At the same time, the external anal sphincter is consciously relaxed. If the situation is appropriate, defecation can be added by conscious abdominal contraction and force expiratory movements against a closed glottis. Stress can increase intestinal motility and cause psychosomatic diarrhea or constipation. So defecation reflex is a spinal reflex. That is, the center for this reflex is present in the sacral region of spinal cord. Okay, and the smooth muscle of internal. So our anus, okay, has the two sphincters. That is the internal anal sphincter and external anal sphincter. Internal anal sphincter is involuntary control. Okay, so it relaxes during defecation. And external anal sphincter is made up of skeletal muscle or it has a somatic nervous system and it is under our voluntary control. Then peristaltic contraction in the rectum pushes material towards the anus. So most of the time rectum will be empty. Okay, whenever the mass peristalsis comes in the cecum, okay, or the colon, the content will be dumped into the rectum. Whenever rectum is distended, it immediately causes defecation reflex, and it pours all the content out, and most of the time rectum will be empty. Okay, so towards the anus. At the same time, the external anal sphincter is consciously relaxed if the situation is appropriate. So this external anal sphincter is under our control. So that's why we can control for some, postpone for some time if the situation is not convenient, because it is under our control, external anal sphincter, and this reflex will abolish for temporarily. Again after half an hour or 1 hour, again the reflex will come. Okay, defecation can be added by conscious abdominal contraction. So this is training what we'll do during defecation. Okay, movement against a closed glottis. Okay, now so most of the time rectum is empty for feces. As I told you, weak functional sphincter exists about 20 centimeter from the anus at the juncture between the sigmoid colon and the rectum. There is also a sharp angulation. Okay, so there is a angulation present here in the rectum. Okay, this diagram I'll show you. There is also a sharp angulation here that contributes additional resistance to filling up the rectum. So most of the time it is empty because sphincter, some weak functional sphincter is present about 20 centimeter from the anus at the junction between sigmoid colon and rectum. So at the junction between sigmoid colon and rectum, there is a functional sphincter present, and there is a angulation between rectum and the sigmoid colon, sigmoido-rectal angulation, sharp angulation. This also causes resistance of filling the rectum. When a mass movement forces feces into the rectum, the desire of defecation occurs immediately, including reflex contraction of the rectum and relaxation of anal sphincters. Okay, internal and external sphincter. So internal sphincter is a involuntary in control and supplied by pelvic nerve. Okay, parasympathetic and sympathetic. And here the external sphincter is, no, this is supplied by pelvic nerve. External is by the somatic nervous system. It comes from the pudendal nerve. Okay. So now coming on to the this hastration movement. So little bit detail is here. These are large circular constriction occur in the large intestine. At each of these constriction, about 2.5 centimeter of the circular muscle will contract. The longitudinal muscle of colon, that is tenae colae, which I told you, which is aggregated into 3 longitudinal strips called tenae colae, contracts. Okay, during haustral movement, the circular muscle also contract and longitudinal muscles also contract. These combined contraction of circular and longitudinal strips of muscle cause the unstimulated portion of large intestine to bulge outward into a bag-like sacs called hastration. These are called as haustral movements of large intestine. Okay, then when feces enter the rectum, distension of the rectal wall initiate afferent signals. Afferent are sensory signals. So it will go to the spinal cord through the pelvic nerve. Okay, sensory impulses will go to the spinal cord through the pelvic nerve, that spread through the myenteric plexus to initiate peristaltic wave in the descending colon, sigmoid and rectum, forcing feces towards the anus. As the peristaltic wave approaches the anus, the internal anal sphincter is relaxed by inhibitory signal from the myenteric plexus. If the external anal sphincter is also consciously, voluntarily relaxed at the same time, defecation occurs. Okay, parasympathetic defecation reflex that involves the sacral segment of the spinal cord and it comes through the pelvic nerve, enhances intrinsic mesenteric reflexes. So parasympathetic causes relaxation of sphincter and helps in the defecation. Okay, this is the diagram to show the defecation reflex. Defecation reflex is very important for you people as an examination point of view. Okay, it is a very commonly asked 3 marks question. Okay, sometime only just to draw the diagram they'll ask you for 3 marks. Okay, so here it is shown here. So above is the internal anal sphincter and below is the external anal sphincter. Okay, so whatever is seen here is the internal anal sphincter and this is the external anal sphincter. This is the rectum and the sigmoid colon. So afferent nerve or sensory nerve, whenever the rectum is distended, the impulse, the receptors will be stimulated here and the impulse will go to the spinal cord. Okay, through the pelvic nerve. Okay, afferent nerve or parasympathetic nerve fiber, that is the pelvic nerve. Okay, so the information will reach to the spinal cord through the pelvic nerve and the information, so through this is the sensory pathway. It enters the spinal cord and through the same spinal cord it will, same pelvic nerve it will come out. Okay, so pelvic nerve is both afferent and efferent. It carries the sensory impulses and again through the pelvic nerve the motor impulses will also come to the sigmoid colon, internal sphincter and to the rectum. Okay, so this is the parasympathetic stimulation. Then for the external sphincter, the somatic nervous system, that is the skeletal motor nerve, this is the pudendal nerve. Okay, so external sphincter is supplied by the somatic nervous system, that is the pudendal nerve, and these centers are under control from the higher conscious center, that is cortex. That's why whenever the condition is favorable, then only we can relax the external sphincter and defecate. When condition is not favorable, our cortex will send inhibitory impulses and that will inhibit temporarily defecation reflex. Understood? This is the defecation reflex. This is very important. Go through your textbooks and make your own simple diagram. Okay. Now coming on to the one more diagram to show the integrated reflexes. Okay, so here what happened? Presence of food in the stomach. Okay, and presence of chyme in the duodenum. Okay, so these causes stimulate mass movements here. Okay, this is called as gastrointestinal reflex or gastrocolic reflexes, isn't it? Okay, so then this will cause the peristaltic movements and mass movements in the colon. This initiate the mass peristaltic movement in the small intestine, that is peristaltic rush is also there, that I told you in the last class, and mass peristaltic movements also occur in the colon, large intestine also. Okay, so mass peristaltic movements occurs, stimulation of parasympathetic control, defecation reflexes. Okay, and the stimulation of local defecation reflexes, all this thing will cause the defecation to occur. This is the rectum. Okay, so these are the integrated reflexes. So this is gastrocolic reflexes. Coming on to the, as I told you, the some angulation I told you. So at rest, what happened? Anorectal angle. See, you can make here, it is a very acute 90-degree angle at rest. So this also resists emptying of cecal content into the rectum. Hence the rectum is most of the time empty. Okay, so here the things are shown nicely here. This is an external anal sphincter. Okay, internal anal sphincter inside. Okay, outside is the external anal sphincter, internal anal sphincter. This is an anorectal angle. Okay, and this is the puborectalis muscle. So all this muscle will contract during defecation. Okay, so this is an coccyx. Okay, so during straining or during defecation, what happen? This angle will be obliterated. Anorectal angle will be obliterated. Okay, so sigmoid colon and rectum will come in alignment, and the content will be poured to the rectum and descend the pelvic floor, and these muscles will be contracted. Okay, so this is about the angulation in defecation. Okay, now coming on to some of the applied aspects of small intestine and large intestine also. So applied aspect, Hirschsprung's disease or megacolon, or it is also called as aganglionosis. All these things all are same. Okay, Hirschsprung's disease. So this occurs usually in the newborns because of the congenital absence of plexus, mesenteric and Meissner plexus. Okay, these mesenteric and Meissner plexus during development they have to move from cranial to caudal direction. They have to move. In some newborns, there is a failure to move these plexus to the colon. Okay, will lead to congenital absence of mesenteric and Meissner plexus, and this leads to that part of the colon where those plexus are not there. It will not have any movement, and the accumulation of material occurs, and that part will become over distended. Okay, no ganglionic cell area affected by Hirschsprung's disease. So here there is no ganglia, no motility. Then the part above it, here there is an obstruction for movement, isn't it? So this is a no ganglionic cell area affected by Hirschsprung's disease, usually occur in newborns. So the area proximal to it becomes distended because of the obstruction of passage to these material. Hence this is called as Hirschsprung disease, megacolon or aganglionosis. Okay, so these are the ganglionic cells. If they are absent, they lead to the Hirschsprung's disease. Okay, so this is one more diagram to show the Hirschsprung disease, normal colon and rectum here. Okay, here Hirschsprung, see the distension proximal to the obstruction. Okay, so swollen colon and narrowed rectum. See here operated how much it has been distended. Okay. Now coming on to the obstruction, gastric obstruction. Obstruction can occur in any part of the GIT. Okay, so causes for obstruction are spasm of a. So what is the treatment for this disease? So for Hirschsprung disease, so this part of the colon, okay, the which is aganglionic or abnormal will be removed surgically. Usually the treatment is surgical. It will be removed surgically, and approximation of the normal ends will be done. Okay, so the treatment is mainly surgical. Okay, obstruction can occur in any part of the GIT. So causes is spasm of segment of the gut, paralysis of segment of the gut, peritoneal adhesion, and fibrotic constriction from ulcer, and the carcinoma of any part of the GIT. So in general, these are the causes for gastric obstruction. So it can occur at any part of gastrointestinal tract. So spasm of some part of the gut or GI tract may occur. Paralysis of segment of some part of GI tract may occur. Peritoneal adhesion may occur, and constriction, fibrotic constriction may cause the obstruction of GI tract. Then the most common site of obstruction at pylorus persist. So if the obstruction is at pylorus, so here most common site of obstruction. hypertrophic pylorus may occur in some individuals. So if obstruction is at pyloric end, then persistent vomiting of stomach content result in loss of excessive hydrogen ion causing metabolic alkalosis. So the stomach content cannot go forward, hence the persistent vomiting occurs and the content of stomach will be vomited out. Hence the H plus ion will be lost causing metabolic alkalosis. If the obstruction is at small intestine, vomitus contain large amount of water and electrolyte resulting in severe dehydration. So here the if it is at the intestine, obstruction is in the intestine, some part of digestion would have occurred here, isn't it? So the content which is remaining in the intestine will come out. So vomitus contain large amount of water and electrolyte resulting in severe dehydration. At distal end of large intestine, if the obstruction is at distal end of large intestine, it may lead to constipation or difficulty in passing the stool. Okay, if rupture of intestine occurs, then there is a circulatory shock resulting from severe vomiting. Okay, so these are the site of obstruction and what are its consequences. Okay, so this is the again a diagram to show. So proximal colon. So here the carcinoma. Okay, angiodysplasia may occur. So this is too much for you, no problem. Just I have downloaded the picture. At least you will come to know some of the terminologies. Okay. In the rectum, carcinoma may occur. Okay, carcinoma is the most common. Then polyps may occur, proctitis may occur, solitary ulcers may occur in the rectum. They are the causes for obstruction. In the anus, fissure and hemorrhoids. Okay, in the anus, fissures and hemorrhoids, they may not cause the obstruction, but they lead to severe pain. Okay, severe pain occur. Okay, so these are in common the diseases which occur in a particular part of a large intestine. Okay, and here the sigmoid colon and all diverticular diseases will occur. Again here the carcinoma or polyps will occur at this part. Okay, ulcerative colitis occur in the lower part of the descending colon. Then ischemic colitis is common in the proximal part of the descending colon. Okay, so these are the. Then in intestine, intussusception. Small bowel intussusception may occur, that is the coiling of intestine. One, the small intestine will go into the large intestine. Okay, that is called as intussusception. Enteritis, okay, infection of the small intestine. Meckel's diverticulum, this is again a congenital problem. Leiomyoma, infarction or Crohn's disease, these are all occur in the small intestine. Okay, so some of the common diseases which occur in our small and large intestine. Okay, now what is this volvulus? Volvulus is, it is an obstruction caused by twisting or knotting of the GI tract. Most common site is in the sigmoid colon. So sigmoid colon here. So most common site is the sigmoid colon. Causes are abdominal adhesion after surgery and injury. So here what happened? Obstruction caused by twisting or knotting of the GI tract. So most commonly it is occur after surgery or injury. Disease of large intestine such as Hirschsprung's disease. In those cases, this type of obstruction may occur. Treatment is colonoscopy in mild cases and surgery in the severe. Okay, so this is a diagram. This is a normal loop of intestine twist around itself. Loop. So this also may lead to the obstruction. This is called as volvulus. Okay, loop of intestine twist around itself. Okay, next to the diarrhea. You might all have heard this and you might all have suffered this also in your day-to-day life, isn't it? So diarrhea is the frequent and profuse discharge of intestinal content in loose and fluid form. It is the frequent and profuse discharge of intestinal content in loose and fluid form. It occurs due to increased movement of intestine. So causes are dietary abuse, if something abnormal, if something irritant, very much spicy if you are taken, then dietary abuse is the commonest cause I feel nowadays for the diarrhea. Next is the infection by the viruses, rotavirus, intestinal diseases. Okay, so these are in general causes of diarrhea. Okay, there are two types. Acute diarrhea may occur, chronic diarrhea may occur. Acute diarrhea lasts for around 1 to 2 days. It is mostly due to viral and bacterial infection. Okay, also known as traveler's diarrhea. Chronic diarrhea lasts for around at least 4 weeks. It usually results due to intestinal disease or disorders such as celiac or Crohn's disease. Okay, so this is chronic diarrhea, mostly lasts for around 1 month, and it may be due to some intestinal disorders such as celiac or Crohn's diseases. Okay, next coming on to symptoms. So what are the symptoms? You all have suffered, I hope. Okay, so nausea, abdominal pain, cramping, bloating, dehydration, fever and bloody stools, then fatigue, increased thirst and decreased urination. Decreased urination is because of dehydration. This is also increased thirst is also because of dehydration. Treatment is proper hygiene of a hand, well cooked food in hygienic condition, avoid frozen food, oral ORS. Okay, then antibiotics if needed. Okay, so oral rehydration sachet therapy. This is a very important treatment. Almost all of you might have tasted this also. Okay, so whenever there is a diarrhea, profuse diarrhea for 1 day, it is recommended to start this ORS, especially in a newborn. Okay, newborn dehydration is more dangerous than compared to the adults. So immediately I have to start with the oral rehydration therapy. Next, coming on to the diverticulosis. I showed you the region where the diverticulosis are common. So it is a condition of having diverticula in the colon, which are out pocketing of the colonic mucosa and submucosa through weaknesses of muscle layer in the colon wall. So diverticula is, they are the out pouches. Okay, out packetings of the colonic mucosa. They are more common in the sigmoid colon, which is a common place for increased pressure. This is uncommon before the age of 40 and increases in incident after the age of 40. So in case sigmoid colon, these diverticula, they are the out packetings, as I told you, and this is because of the increased pressure. Okay. Next is, this is the again one more very important and commonest condition, that is appendicitis. Okay, so inflammation of appendix is known as appendicitis. Appendix does not have any function in human being, but it can create major problem when diseased. Appendicitis can develop at any age. It is very common between 10 to 30 years of age. Detail is not my topic. You can, if you are interested, you can read. Just I am introducing these terminologies to you. Okay. This, so healthy intestine. This is an healthy intestine. Here the inflammation of the appendix you can show. So appendix is not very swollen here. It is normal here. Okay. But here it is inflamed. Infection is there, and because of the infection it is swollen. Okay, and here there is a obstruction or swelling in ascending colon also you can see to some extent. Okay. Then coming on to the next condition, that is paralytic ileus. This also I told you in the last class itself, isn't it? Paralytic ileus. It is due to the paralysis of intestinal muscles. It is also known as pseudo obstruction and is one of the major cause of intestinal obstruction in infant and children. Okay, it is due to the paralysis of intestinal muscle. It is also known as pseudo obstruction and is one of the major cause of intestinal obstruction in infant and children. Okay, causes for paralytic ileus are gastroenteritis, that is the infection, electrolyte imbalance, abdominal surgery, decreased blood supply to the gut, drugs like narcotics. Okay, so abnormal handling, okay, or malhandling during the abdominal surgeries or injuries, decreased blood supply, drugs like narcotics, adhesion, gallstone, hernia, or impacted stool and tumor. All those things may cause the paralytic ileus. Okay, it is due to the paralysis of intestinal muscles. Okay. Now, even tuberculosis of intestine also can occur. You know this? Tuberculosis of lungs is very, very common, but tuberculosis of intestine is also not less common. Okay, there are many cases when you come to the surgery, you will know. It is infection of the peritoneum, hollow or solid abdominal organs and abdominal lymphatics with Mycobacterium tuberculosis. But these conditions are diagnosed most of the time at an advanced condition. They are not be diagnosed early. But the time is over, students. What's the time now?
Ma'am, 5 minutes are left.
Still 5 minutes are there now? Okay, no problem. It is infection of peritoneum, hollow or solid abdominal organs and abdominal lymphatics with Mycobacterium tuberculosis. Signs and symptoms are abdominal pain, weight loss, so the very important symptom of tuberculosis is prolonged fever, evening rays of fever. So fever will be present in a patient for months together. Okay, and anorexia, that is loss of appetite, is called as anorexia. Change in bowel habits, nausea and vomiting. But tuberculosis of lung will be diagnosed early, whereas tuberculosis of intestine will be diagnosed very late. Hence, this condition has to be kept in mind if these symptoms are there. Okay. So, weight loss, chronic fever, evening rays of fever, loss of appetite, okay, abdominal pain, change in bowel habits, nausea and prolonged nausea and vomiting. Okay, so tubercle bacilli enter GIT through ingestion of infected milk or sputum. So milk from an animal, if it has a tubercular bacteria, okay, they enter into the GI tract. Mucosal layer gets infected and form epithelioid tubercles in the lymphoid tissue of the submucosa. Complications, bowel may rupture because of the damage to the submucosa and mucosa. Rupture of bowel may occur. Treatment is again same, that is anti-tubercular drug therapy. Okay, that is for 6 months, 8 months, 9 months, depending upon the condition, the treatment has to be given. That is anti-tubercular drug therapy has to be given. Now, one more condition, that is intussusceptions. Intussusception is, it is a form of bowel obstruction in which one segment of intestine go inside another. Okay, so there is an entangling. It usually occurs at junction of small and large intestine. So this also leads to the obstruction. Causes are viral infection, child born with polyp or diverticulum. Okay, child born with polyp or diverticulum. So intussusception can be. So this is the diagram to show you the intussusception. So this is the large intestine and this is the small intestine. The small intestine is in the large intestine. Okay, so this is the looping. entangling between the large intestine and small intestine, that may lead to the intussusception, and again it may lead to the obstruction, distension of the proximal part and severe pain abdomen. Then now coming on to the regulation of gastrointestinal tract motility, how this is regulated. Okay, so this is regulated mainly by the three ways. Reflexes, this you already know, many reflexes I told you while taking the motility, that originate outside the digestive system. Okay, so those are called as long, like vasovagal. The reflexes which is controlled by vagus nerve, they are the long reflexes. Okay, originate outside the digestive system, and reflexes that originate inside the digestive system called the enteric nervous system or short reflexes. So gastrocolic reflex, duodenocolic reflex. Okay, so those are all colonocolic reflexes. So many reflexes are there. These are all the these are all the short reflexes. Okay, they originate inside the digestive system itself. Okay, so there are long reflexes, short reflexes which control the GI motility, and third one is the gastrointestinal peptides. Some of the hormones are chemicals. So gastrointestinal peptides excite or inhibit motility and can cause altered peristaltic activity, contraction of the gallbladder for bile release, and regulated gastric emptying to maximum digestion and absorption. So these gastrointestinal peptides also very important. They are excitatory, or in some are excitatory and some are inhibitory for gastric motility. So the regulation of gastrointestinal peptides include CCK, that is cholecystokinin, secretin, motilin, glucagon-like peptides. So what this CCK does, it is a hormone secreted by endocrine cells of the small intestine and by neurons in the brain and gut. It stimulates gallbladder contraction for bile release. It inhibits gastric emptying. It promotes intestinal motility. Okay, secretin, it is a hormone secreted by endocrine cells in the small intestine. It inhibits gastric emptying. Motilin, it is a hormone secreted by endocrine cell in the small intestine. It stimulates migrating motor complexes. That is, I told you, those are the movements which occur in interdigestive phase. When there is no digestion is going on, when there is no food in the stomach, these movements are also called as housekeepers of GI tract, isn't it? So migrating motor complexes, they are called as the, so motilin is responsible for migrating motor complexes, and glucagon like peptides, it is a hormone secreted by endocrine cell in the small intestine. It slows gastric emptying. Okay, so cholecystokinin and gastrin increases the gastric motility, whereas the increases the intestinal motility, whereas the secretin, motilin and glucagon, they inhibit. Now coming on to the last part, that is feces. What do you mean by feces? So whatever waste after complete digestion and absorption, okay, what is the waste material which is not useful for our body, it is mixed with the intestinal secretion, forms a feces. Okay, mainly from intestinal secretion, partly from the ingested food. So it has almost 75% water and 25% solids. And solids include cellulose, that is undigested part of our food. Okay, bacteria and inorganic material and fat. Okay, so these are the contents of our feces, and the color of the feces is because of the bile pigments. Okay, and the smell of our feces is because of the substances like sketal and indol. Okay, so in case of obstructive jaundice, what happens? Because of absence of bile pigments, the feces will become pale and foul smelling. That is one of the features for diagnosing obstructive jaundice, isn't it? Pale stool. Next. So this is the slide showing the transit time of food in our GI tract. So after barium meal, if you take the series of X-rays, okay, so you will get the transit time of chyme via the gut. So small intestine, it takes 4 hours to reach the barium meal. To reach the small intestine, it takes around 4 hours. Ascending colon, to reach the ascending colon, it takes around 6 hours. Transverse colon, it takes around 8 hours. And descending and pelvic colon, it takes around 12 hours. And pelvic colon to rectum, it takes around 2 to 3 days sometime. So in colon, intestine will be exposed to the food which we will eat, okay, part by part, like lunch, it will be digested till we take the dinner. But colon, it is not like that. Colon, it is a product of many meals, okay. So whatever is there waste after absorption from the small intestine, whatever is there from 2 to 3 meals, it is accumulated in our pelvic colon, descending and pelvic colon, and from which the water and electrolyte will be again reabsorbed. Finally, the very much waste material will be discarded out by act of defecation. Okay, and this transit time depends on the fiber content of the diet. If the fiber content is more, this will be prolonged. Okay, pelvic colon to rectum, it may not take the 2 to 3 days, it may take only 24 hours, that is 1 day. So you might have heard they will recommend the fiber diet, especially for the diabetic patients and the patient who are suffering from constipation. Okay, fiber diet is always good for our GI tract. Okay, then what are the fibers? Cellulose, hemicellulose, lignin. Okay, these are the fibers. What is the physiological significance of taking fibrous diet? That is fresh vegetables, fruits, all less cooked. Okay, we'll be having all these things. Okay, cellulose, hemicellulose and lignin. What is the physiological importance of these dietary fibers? They are increase in bulk, reduce the efficacy of absorption, reduce the blood cholesterol level, and reduce the incidence of cancer of colon. Okay, so it increases the bulk. So over distension occur fast, reflexes will be set up, and the defecation will occur at a proper time. Reduces the efficacy of absorption, reduces the blood cholesterol level, and reduces the incidence of cancer of colon. Okay, these are the function of dietary fibers. Okay, anyway, thank you. So this finished your movements of small intestine and large intestine. Okay, this has completed the movements of GI tract altogether, coming from your mouth to the large intestine. So we have learnt about the mastication, achieving, then deglutition reflex, okay, then the movement of the stomach, that is mainly the peristaltic movement and relax the receptive relaxation. Okay, then the movement of small intestine. In movement of small intestine, segmental movements, peristaltic movements, and peristaltic rush will come. And in large intestine, haustral movements and the mass peristaltic movements will occur. Then at the end, defecation reflex. Okay, so this finished your movement of small intestine. You go back and read in your book, make your own notes. If you have any doubt, you can call me on, you can ask me your doubt through email or WhatsApp, whatever is convenient for you people. Okay, so any doubts today's class, students? Any doubt? Any doubts here? Hmm? No?
No, ma'am.
No? Okay. One more class I am having on Tuesday. Hmm? So for moment of intestine only they have given me 4 classes, but the portion is over. So that class, what you want? You want me to revise or just a question answer session or discussion? What will do? Hmm? Tuesday 9 to 10.
Revise.
Yes?
Revise.
Huh?
Ma'am,
Yeah,
revision.
revising is easy for you. Isn't it? Huh?
I'm along
Okay,
with this.
revising only? Yeah?
And some questions
Yes?
too, ma'am.
Yeah, revision only. I will ask you in between question also. Okay. So from beginning to end, just I will revise at that 1 hour. Any doubt you can note down and ask me that day. Okay. And just we will discuss. Hmm? If you have any problem or any doubt, you can ask me. Otherwise, I'll be revising. I'll showing you the slides, whatever I have covered for motility of intestine. Okay. Or if you want anything, I can tell you that day. In GI tract, anything you want me to tell? Hmm? Which are not understood, or in respiration. I have taken mechanics of breathing also. Anything you doubt you are having? Hmm?
Ma'am, revise respiration.
Huh? You want revision of respiration?
Yes,
Yes?
ma'am.
Okay, no problem. Hmm? So what part? Mechanics, compliance, what you want? Hmm? Okay, I can do that also, no problem. If many of you want respiration, we can just revise because this is not so difficult, this GI part. If you read, you will understand in the textbook. Okay, respiration, you need to understand the things. Okay, concept. So we will fast go through the whatever I have covered in the respiratory system. Okay. Okay, thank you. Shall I leave now?
Thank you,
Thank you,
ma'am.
ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay, thank you all of you. Stay safe, stay healthy. So you are getting ready to come to Bijapur?
Yes, ma'am.
Packed everything? Hmm?
Not yet,
Many
ma'am.
of you have reached, I feel, isn't it? Hmm? Yes? Anyway, safe journey. Come with all precaution. If you have anything, any problem, just you inform. Hmm? Okay? Okay, thank you.